7 star citizens, it has been a hot second since my last video, and it has also been a year since I posted my biggest video on YouTube, where I talked all about me doing the Pyro playtest over at Citizencon. Well, last week, and a little bit of this week, I got the chance to play 4.0 in Evocati with the visual NDA lifted. So I'm going to tell you all about everything I've gotten to experience with Pyro and show you a bunch of things that I think are really, really cool about this patch. Before we get into it, I do want to quickly mention Citizencon. I did go. It was amazing. I did get really sick afterwards, as did almost everyone, it seems, and I do still have a lingering cough. Big fan of that. But there were a bunch of you that I got to meet at Citizencon, so if you were there, thank you for coming up and saying hi. It felt super, super weird meeting people that knew me from online, and I'm very excited to go to, hopefully, the Citizencon next year. Let's talk a little bit about the news of 4.0 that happened last week as well, which is that a bunch of features got delayed. This Evocati test that we've been doing is pretty much going to be the patch. Pretty much everything engineering related has been delayed from the patch. Now, this says to me they want to get this patch out before the end of the year, and they're committed to getting it out before the end of the year. And I will sort of explain as we go through that I do think these Evocati playtests have been decent enough to sort of speak to releasing before the end of the year, but we'll talk about that in a second. So, 4.0 Evocati. This was my first opportunity ever to go through a jump point, so let's start right there. 4.0 is the biggest patch Star Citizen I've ever released, at least in terms of scale and how much it's going to impact the game. Server meshing is now in the patch. All of these Evocati tests have been 4 to 250, although I personally have not yet been in a server that the full 250 people have been there. But what I have been able to do is jump from Stanton to Pyro. And oh my god, is it amazing. While I'm talking, I'll show you my first ever jump uninterrupted. Obviously, lots of frame rate issues and lots of bugs and whatnot, but it felt crazy being able to finally jump through a jump point. And not to mention, getting the epic jump point music halfway through was just, it was something special. And it really has shown me this is going to be a big deal. Cannot wait to make my first jump in live. The jump itself is pretty easy. You are in quantum mode. You go up to where the wormhole essentially is, and then once you have calibrated, you kind of shoot a bullet at the wormhole, and then it opens up and you're able to go through. The wormhole automatically propels you. All you have to do is steer. However, in all my testing in Evocati, there's essentially been no punishment to hitting the sides. You get a really, really cool VFX effect when you do actually hit the sides, but no times have I been like thrown out of the jump point or anything. There was a couple of times where when I was deliberately slamming into the sides of the jump point as much as I could, that I was once at the end of the jump point further away from the correct exit point than I would like to be. But it didn't feel like a proper punishment. It really felt like I could have just put my hands off the keyboard and mouse, and that would have been fine. You can also join with other people, whether they're in your party or otherwise. There was a few times that I've done this test where I was brought into the jump point with other people around me. I'm not sure if that's deliberate or if it was just well-timed, but it does seem to churn through people quite often. It is super, super buggy. From what we can tell, anytime there's a server error on one side of the jump point, it completely breaks the jump point for that entire shard. So a lot of bug fixes to come. There's hopefully a 4.0 patch today. We just had Evocati for 5 days straight without an updated patch. So pretty impressive, honestly. I'm hoping that we can get into Wave 1 pretty soon, though I imagine we won't see it go to Wave 1 until the IAE patch goes to live, which should be in a couple of weeks. So that's jump points. Super cool. I will say there is like some VFX changes that I would like to see on them. They look a little bit awkward going from the sort of outside clouds to the inside weird, like almost like a milky consistency of the wormhole. I don't know if there's a better way to say it than that. So I'd like to see that transition a little bit better, but otherwise, awesome. And really keen to continue doing it. It just seems like it might be still a bit of a technical hurdle. So that's the jump points. Let's talk about Pyro, because that's obviously the second place you're going to end up after traveling from Santa to Pyro. We got to check out Pyro 1, 2, and 3, as well as, I believe, Checkmate and Obituary stations during the Pyro playtest last year. Now, the entire system has been opened up to us, and there is a lot to it. Firstly, we have all 6 Pyro planets, as well as all of the Pyro 5 moons, which there are 6 of. So there are a lot of places for us to visit. Lots of ground stations, lots of space stations. So let's talk about them a little bit. First off, Pyro 1 seems to have had a fair big facelift over what it looked like last year. In fact, all of the planets actually seem to now have their own gas clouds around them, sort of evolving the skybox every time you're at one of these different planets. And it really does add a lot to the atmosphere when you're flying around. So was actually really cool to see that. Pyro 1, super blue, a very unique looking planet that we have compared to pretty much everything else in the game right now, as well as this really awesome, huge storm on the, what I believe is the north side of the planet. Not much to do here. There are some ground stations for you to visit, but for the most part, it's awesome. I absolutely love Pyro 1. Pyro 2 and Pyro 3 pretty much exactly the same as they were in the Pyro playtest. Monox is Pyro 2, so this is your like more red, very Hurston vibes, or Aberdeen even, in terms of what it sort of looks like and feels like when you're running around there. Bloom, still amazing. The yellow soil and grass and all of the different flora really give it a unique aesthetic over a lot of the other planets. It's also got some of the more of ground stations there for you to visit and see what sort of stuff you can buy. Worth noting, like I said, no missions in the current build of Evocati, so all we're doing at these locations is buying armor, buying commodities, that sort of stuff. Pyro 4 is the first new one. So we saw Pyro 4, Pyro 5, and Pyro 6 during Citizencon 2 years ago, 3 years ago actually, I think, at this point. So we had an idea of what they would look like aesthetics-wise. Pyro 4 is awesome. It's got this red soil. It's got a lot of really tall mountains, as well as the uniquely shaped mountains that you can attempt to fly through. Although every time I tried, I did end up crashing. Not crashing the game, as in just physically crashing. So they're a bit hard to actually get through. But it gave a big sort of like Scottish Highlands, but red sort of vibe to it a lot of the time, as well as it had some really cool areas near water for you to fly to. So absolutely loved Pyro 4. Seems like a great place in the future for us to build some space bases. So I actually fully expect most people are either going to go to Pyro 3 or Pyro 4. Pyro 5 is a gas giant, so do not expect there to be many things for you to do at Pyro 5. However, there are 6 moons of Pyro 5. All of them are landable, all of them unique, including the giant Scar moon, which I don't remember exactly which number moon it is, but I'll show it on screen here. And that is super cool. They've got this really awesome ground station right at the peak of one of the edges of the Scar that you can look out over. It's a true vista. It's awesome to look at. Hopefully, there's a ton of content for us to do on these moons. Like I said, there are some ground stations, so I imagine we'll see some missions. I imagine we'll be able to purchase quite a few things from these guys, and I will talk on that in a second because there are some new stuff to purchase. Pyro 6, or Terminus, is our final planet, and it is dead. It is barren. It is gross, and I love it. I really like the idea of having some of these planets be abandoned and feel abandoned when you go and fly on them. So it's very gray. It's very gross and icky, if that's the best way to describe it. But in addition, it also has Ruin Station around it. Now, both Pyro 6 and Pyro 4 have rings around the planet, similar to what you'll see at Yella, one of the moons of Crusader. So it does, once again, create some really cool, unique looks when you're flying around. But Pyro 6 has Ruin Station in the asteroid belt that is around it. So it's a little bit extra. And I think that's something we should touch on, is the LEO stations. So we got to experience Checkmate and Obituary during the Pyro playtest last year. We now have Ruin Station as well. And they have had a bit of a change. So for the most part, the layouts internally of the main areas are pretty much identical, but there is one huge aspect that's been added to these LEOs called contested zones. So if you've been following along through ISCs, SCLs, contested zones are the new PvEVP feature that's a big part of Pyro, where it's multiple levels, tons and tons of rooms, a bunch of loot, bunch of enemies to kill, a bunch of puzzles to solve. So sort of very fun, almost like dungeon-like or raid-like quality to some of these areas. But the fact that it's PvEVP, because you can encounter players during it, also adds to that level of danger. So a couple of things on the contested zones. One, the layouts are very different in each of these areas. I imagine the loot that you're going to get at each of these areas, the main loot, the big loot that everyone's been talking about, is going to be different. There are these unique puzzles where you have to get key cards to open doors. You have to get fuses to open doors. You have to find unique pathways through certain areas, all the while trying to deal with just constant spawning enemies who are accurate right now. Obviously, the frame rate during the PTU has not been particularly well, but I've been trying to solo these for pretty much the entire week, and it's basically impossible to solo these. You need someone else with you to distract the enemies, to heal you up, all that sort of stuff. So they are hard in a good way, and I'm really, really excited to see how these contested zones play out as we continue on through testing and as we get access to these new prizes, these new things that we can earn. The layout of each contested zone is kind of cool, so there's also like the amount of effort that they have put into almost like the story of these contested zones, because they're basically just abandoned parts of the stations, is really cool. They've done a really good job level designing this entire location. In a similar vein, we now have asteroid bases as well. These are kind of like tiny contested zones from what we can tell. I imagine these are going to be where we're going to be doing just like your eliminate missions, your missing persons missions, those kinds of things. A lot of your filler missions throughout the course of the day. But there are a bunch of them. Pretty much everywhere on the map where it says RAB is one of these asteroid bases. So the missions themselves are split out quite a lot. There's a lot of things to do. One thing that I first noticed at one of these asteroid bases, and is my next sort of topic, was, I scanned and I found some minables. Except I noticed that they were way, way better than Stanton. And that goes into the new stuff, which is resources and minables. So as you would expect, essentially former mining colony that Pyro was, there's a lot of leftover goodies around. Certainly, it seems much more than Stanton. We took the prospector and the mole out a few times just to see what we could scrounge up. And it seems like minerals are way more plentiful in terms of the high value stuff. You're seeing tons and tons of taronite, bexolite, laranite, quantanium, including some new minerals as well, which we've been able to find. So it does feel like they want Pyro to be a kind of place you can go to, and you can make a higher profit if you are doing those gathering professions. But obviously it's going to be a lot more dangerous, and you're going to have to find a way to get that out of Pyro ASAP. Including new materials. When we've gone through all of these new different bases, there's also a ton of new commodities. And this is both buying and selling. So I fully expect that they do want to test out economy-esque stuff in Pyro. Once again, this is all super, super early days. We're still at Evo. There's going to be a lot of stuff we're going to have to test out. But it feels good. So that's where we're at with 4.0 at the moment, at least in Evo Cardi. Like I said, the only thing that I think is going to change from now to a live release of this patch is that the missions will work in Pyro. At the moment, it seems like they're partially implemented, but none of them work at all. You can't really accept them, or they don't have descriptions. But like the factions are there, it seems, and there certainly are plenty of faction unique items that we can already buy. So that is obviously something that will definitely change. There's one thing that I really want to see changed over the course of the next few playtests, may even happen today, but certainly was something I want before live, is 250 players does not feel like enough. Pyro is so massive. It is truly astounding how much you have to jump in this system and how far it is. If you want to get from the Stanton system station to pretty much anywhere, like the jump point station to anywhere, it's going to be 60 to 7 million kilometers for you to fly. That is ridiculous. In a good way, to be fair. I think it is cool that you do have these large jumps. But it's going to mean if we only have 250 people split across both Stanton and Pyro, I feel like both are going to feel too quiet because everyone's going to be spread out too far. So I'd like to see that number come up. There's been a bunch of server meshing tests over the course of the last few months that have gone up as far as 2,000, but it sounds like 500 is a lot more reasonable, at least in terms of tests. So hopefully next couple of weeks we start to see that happen. And then we go from there. That's about it. I just wanted to talk to you guys about 4.0, show you guys a bunch of footage of 4.0. Like I said, there's going to be another test today, hopefully also not under NDA, so I will be streaming that as well. And we have IAE coming up. Citizencon has reinvigorated my want to do YouTube content, so expect some more YouTube videos soon, including, of course, very, very soon with IE. The Polaris is not too far away now. So if you like the video, make sure to give it a like, subscribe if you want to see some more YouTube content. And, of course, don't forget to go follow us over on Answer the Call, where myself and Salty Mike do our weekly podcast, talking all things Star Citizen. This week, we're likely to be talking about the monthly report, as well as the SCL on one of the Citizencon panels. So that's it from me. Have a good one, guys. I'll see you soon. Hopefully not in 4 months this time.